There are two main things I really didn't understand when I was beginning my guitar journey. One, that I would spend all my money and free time acquiring more guitars throughout the rest of my life, even though I can only play one at a time. And two, that I could never really get my chords to sound how I wanted them to, how I could hear them in different recordings that I was trying to emulate. I would look up chord charts, I could never get it to sound right, even if it was a song as simple as like a G, C, F. I couldn't get it to sound like I was trying to, right? It just has that beginner sound to it. So today we're going to talk about what I think a lot of beginners miss when they're practicing their chords and just kind of getting started. And it all starts with selective string hitting, all right? When you're first starting out, let's take a G chord. It's like you're worried so much about getting your fingers right and not getting any buzzing or something like that you really don't focus as much on your strumming hand, whether you're playing with a pick or playing with your fingers. In fact, one of the first things you're starting off with is like, how do I play a G major chord? Sometimes it's your ring finger and your pinky on 3B and 3E. Sometimes it's just your ring finger on 3B. What's going on with the high E string? Sometimes it's just your ring finger on 3 on the high E string. Valid questions, don't really have a great answer for you there. But I have come to love the ring finger 3rd fret B string being on top of the chord. So what I mean by selective string hitting is when I first started playing chords, I'd be like, all right, I'm getting my hand in position to play this G chord. And then I just start strumming, right? Maybe go to a C chord. And you know, maybe my rhythm was getting better and I was playing that chord cleaner, but there was no dynamic to it. And what I didn't realize, and what I wish somebody would have told me, or just spent more time on, is selective string hitting with your strumming hand, because once you can do that, you can start opening up an entire world of different inflections and cool sounds, right? So let's talk about 3 different inflections that you could do over different chords in this key. We're just going to do G major, C major, and then F major at the very end. But what I mean by like an inflection is something that adds a lot of character to a chord. And I guarantee if you're hearing like one of your favorite artists play open chords like this, they're probably doing this every now and then. So a typical G major inflection could look like this. Okay, and that was all really just playing around a G major chord. Wasn't technically changing the chord, even though some of the notes in the chord were changing. But if I were to do that same thing with my fretting hand without being selective of the strings that I hit, which I'll go into more detail in a second, it would sound like this. Which you can kind of hear the essence of what was going on, but you're not getting like a clean and a clear representation of what's happening. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a G major chord, and then your pointer finger is going to be the focus of your left hand, and then the amount of strings that you hit is going to be the focus of your right hand. Or if you're a lefty, just swap those, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pointer finger and go from the A string to the D string. Same fret, 2nd fret, but I might do like a hammer-on, like that, okay? Now, no matter where you are in your guitar journey skill level-wise, it's never too early to start incorporating hammer-ons and pull-offs into the inflections of the chords that you're playing, all right? So, it might be difficult to keep your ring finger and your middle finger down on this shape while doing that. But the way to think about it is just planting these 2 fingers here and then isolating that right there. Or going from 2A to open D back to 2A, right? So like, okay, so I'm picking, and again, this isn't going to be how we're going to end up doing it, but I'm just really focusing on the 2A. I'm getting a hammer on open 2, and then hitting the D string again, then leaving and going back to A, right? See how selective that is, 1 string at a time. Now if I do that within the chord, I can have that built around the middle of the chord where I do the same thing. but I'm not strumming all the strings. I can strum all the strings if I want. And I get a little bit of that idea, but once I really focus in, and maybe I'm just gonna aim for the lowest 3 strings here. See, now I have now it's a much more interesting and dynamic way to play that chord, right? And you're kind of getting it within it. And all that comes from just working on the stroke of either your strum. And see how, like, I'm not going through all 6 strings? A great way to do that is to kind of find a way to lock your hand into a repeatable motion. What I ended up doing is I kind of put my palm on the bridge where I'm not muffling the strings. But then if I want to, I can muffle it, right? So kind of just finding a good point of contact to get that repeatable dynamic going, I think is really, really important, and it's never too early to start. Even though it might seem like more of an intermediate type technique, that's really a big part of getting your chords to sound a little bit more professional. Another way to get it to sound professional is by putting Elixir strings on your guitar. This video is sponsored by Elixir strings, my all-time favorite strings. If this is your first time here, you know that I'm a huge stan for Elixirs. They make your guitar sound better, in my opinion. The strings do last longer too. So they feel better, they last longer, they sound better. I like having 12s on an acoustic guitar, 12 nano web. Generally I go for the 80-20 bronze, but sometimes I'll switch it up. I think these are the best tone of all the Elixir strings. Huge fan of theirs. I have an affiliate link in the description of this video. So check it out, because all these tips and tricks aren't even gonna work if you're not using Elixir strings, am I right? So thank you to them for sponsoring the video. But that's going to be the first thing that we're doing. In fact, if we are focusing on just the lowest 3 strings, you don't even need your ring finger to be on the 3rd fret of the B string, right? Now you run the risk of maybe going a little too far and hitting the open strings up higher, but that's a great way to start. Like that, okay? And this is going to bring us to the next chord that we're going to talk about, and that's going to be C major. Now, what I want to do is I want to do that same thing with the G first, but use different fingers, right? So now I'm going to use my ring finger as the 3rd fret on the E string for the G major chord, and my middle finger for the 2nd fret on the A string. And I can play that same chord with my pinky on the B string right there. Right? And it doesn't sound any different, but I'm using different fingers because contextually, maybe I know I'm going to a C chord. Just like that, right? So there's a regular, typical C major chord, 3A, 2D, open G, 1B. And I can do the same thing with the inflections of my middle finger. One thing I like to do too is to make this chord right here a C/G chord, where I keep the G in the bass. So now it's 3E, 3A, 2D, open G, 1B, open E, right? I think that's a good habit to start getting into thicker slash chords earlier, because, you know, let's say you are just focusing on the lowest 3 strings. And then I can just kind of switch just like that. I'm just dropping my pinky, moving my middle finger down a string. And this is just a much more concentrated way of playing G major to C major. And because I have the same strings that I'm hitting, and I'm only really changing like a fret off, it has more of a glued together sound, right? Which I think is a little more professional. Where when you get into trouble as a beginner is when you try to make these wide switches where now my root note is on the A string, my lowest note is on the A string. And that's a tough switch when you're first starting out. What's a lot easier is just leading with the ring finger and then going in like that. See how much more efficient that is? And again, because I'm not playing all 6 strings, it doesn't really matter, because I'm just focusing on those lowest strings. And now maybe if I do want to expand into that G string, I can use my middle finger to inflect this C major chord. So now I'm just using, you know, those open strings to my advantage. And then if I do get into the other open strings on top, you can bring your pointer finger into the game, or even leave it open to make a prettier C major 7 chord anyways. And then switch right to a G. And again, you can see that the stroke is really just kind of concentrated and not getting all of the strings, right? It also, added bonus is it's not as loud, so you're not annoying the people around you when you're practicing. Just a free tip. So let's continue on down through the string set to go to an F major chord. Right? A lot of people kind of check out when they see F major because they see it as that big bar chord. It's tough to play when you're first starting out. Even though, again, the bar chord has a lot of advantages because you get that low, deep note, which especially sounds great on like a big Martin Dreadnought D18 like this one. But you don't always have to do that. In fact, what you could do is you could take that same C major C/G chord and then keep your pointer finger exactly where it is on 1B and move that whole shape down a string. Okay, so now I've got 3A, 3D, 2G, 1B. And then you can start inflecting the G and B strings by going on and off. And one of my favorite sounds for this chord is actually taking them on and off together, right? In fact, there's a Coldplay song called Don't Panic that's really, it starts out, the intro is just this with the F major 7 chord. So that's the whole thing, right? A really pretty song, and then to kind of work on doing it independently one at a time. Like that. Now, another cool thing that you could do is let's take a smaller version of this where it's just your ring finger, middle finger, and pinky making that staircase on the D, G, and B strings. Now you'll notice that for this one, my ring finger is actually touching the A string, but not letting it ring out, okay? So just like I can selectively hit strings with my picking hand, I can also selectively mute strings with a finger that is already fretting another string, kind of pulling double duty. So my ring finger is holding down the D string, but also nudged up against the A string, which gives a little more margin of error for my right hand while I'm trying to really focus on just locking down those 3 strings, right? And now the great thing about this shape specifically is for the first time, we don't have any open strings that are helping us, right? Remember with the G we had this, then open for the C. But for that F chord, none of the strings are open. Now I'm gonna choose to inflect this by using my pinky to get a hammer-on the G string from 2 to 3. See how like focused that is? So because I'm shortening the amount of strings I'm hitting, and especially because now they're the higher strings, I can really hear the difference that having that pinky down just 1 fret higher from where my middle finger is. Just like that. Now, the benefit of doing it without any open strings is now it becomes a movable shape. So if I want to have that same sound, I can just move the whole thing. I just moved it 2 frets higher. So I went from an F, I went to an F sharp, I skipped the F sharp, I went to a G. And then I can just add my pinky there, all the way to C. And then all of a sudden, now you're moving all the way throughout the fretboard. Okay, so that's a lot of really valuable stuff because then you can just take wherever you know your root note is. In this case, it happens to be my ring finger is the 3rd fret on the D string, which is an F. If you learn, the octave down, you can maybe like track it through the high or the low E string to find out where that root note is. Check out my Patreon if you want to find out how to find specific target notes and branch them off into anywhere. And that's really how you can help kind of move these target chords around and find the names. Also uploading a minor chord version of this lesson on the Patreon today. So I'll link you in the description of that too. But now we've got open chords that we can selectively hit. And again, I really can't overstate how important it is to really work on just getting a certain amount of strings that you can hit in a repeatable way. Which, remember, point of contact to kind of keep it comfortable. And again, when I say point of contact, could just be your forearm on the body of the guitar, whatever's comfortable. And that way, see, like my hand is just kind of hanging. And this is as far down as I can go, right, without moving my arm. And then it's back up. So it's a repeatable motion. And then you can even fine tune it with a second point of contact like that to kind of get, maybe like a single string that you can kind of like really kind of shred or something like that. But, super important to really be able to selectively hit something, especially if you're playing with other musicians. Because in some instances, a big 6-string open chord is going to sound great, but you want to have that as a dynamic of a ceiling that you can hit rather than always kind of playing 10 out of 10 volume-wise. So just a few tips. Let me know what you think. Like I said, thank you again to Elixir Strings. Get yourself a set in the affiliate link in the description, and I will talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot.